used to rather like having a small majority, didn't they?
Yes, as I was saying earlier, it tends to act as some kind of discipline. But Tony Blair's Labour Party has been very much made in his image. He's doubled the membership of the party since he has been leader. Many of these new Labour candidates who are coming in are fully subscribing Blairites. The old left is a diminishing force in Labour's ranks. This is a leader of the Labour Party who has had a greater control over his shadow cabinet, over the national executive and over the party conference than any Labour leader before him. And he's already started a process of reforms on the party conference and on the national executive to make sure that the national executive doesn't become a focus of opposition in the way it has done under past Labour governments. So he's thought his way through a lot of this already. Tony Blair is somebody with the ambition not just to win one election, but to be the first Labour leader actually to maintain power through 2 full terms.
What about the Tories? I mean, what's there left to lead, and who will be doing it? Do you think I mean, Michael Heseltine was saying he wanted John Major to stay. That can't be true, surely. I mean, John Major can't stay as leader, can he?
The Tories are now in an extraordinary state. Everybody that we've spoken to tonight on the programme has said, well, we've got to regroup. But regroup as what? Do they regroup as a Eurosceptic party when, for example, the Liberal Democrats, as the most pro-European party, have had their most successful election ever? Do they regroup fighting devolution when they won't have a single Welsh or Scottish MP to maintain that fight against devolution? They seem to have lost out on a number of the key issues. They've got to really rethink their position from the start now.
And who do you think will be leading them? Well, who would be the best person to lead them?
I think it's very difficult for them to work out on the leadership now. They've got to look really at the strength of the different forces when they come back, and the conventional wisdom has been that the smaller the Conservative Party that is returned after this election, the less will be the strength of the Eurosceptics. So maybe it isn't going to be such a shoo-in for a right-wing Eurosceptic contender as we originally thought. I think William Hague's chances have enormously improved because it looks as though Labour will be there for a couple of terms. Michael Heseltine's chances of being the new leader have probably diminished because people will say, Labour majority of 180, 190, they're there for 2 terms, we need somebody who can fight a long fight. He's not going to be around that long in politics. So William Hague, as a 36-year-old who appeals to right and left in the party, his chances must have improved.
Tony King, do you think this historically will be seen as a watershed for the Tory party, or is it something that they will fairly swiftly recover from and regroup, as they've all been saying tonight?
I can't see how they can quickly regroup. As Robin Oakley's just been saying, there are such deep lines of division in the party, and there are in fact 2, and they're not quite the same. People talk about Europe all the time, and that's very profound. But there's also a division about the kind of building on Mrs. Thatcher's legacy that should go on. One of the party tricks you can play if you want to is get 2 Conservatives in the room and ask them what they think about the fall of Margaret Thatcher back in 1990. And one of them will think it was the end of civilization as we know it, and another will say, rejoice, rejoice. It was a wonderful occasion. The Conservative Party still hasn't come to terms with the kind of party it wants to be, a sort of Newt Gingrich American-style Republican Party of extreme anti-statism and individualism, or whether it wants to be the comfortable old one-nation Conservative Party.
You think it as severe as that, do you, the division in the party?
There are a lot of people, of course, as there always have been in the Conservative Party, who quite comfortably straddle these kinds of divides. But those kinds of ideological divisions are just as deep today in the Tory party as they were in the Labour Party at the end of the 70s and the early 80s.
Okay. Now, Peter Kellner, we haven't heard from you for a bit about what you've been discovering about the way people vote and what the trends have been, because it's been such a monumental wipeout of Labour that really... of Tories, I mean, that it's really been almost irrelevant how it's gone in various parts of the country. It seems to have been a uniform smash.
But it's not uniform in terms of in terms of seats. We've seen the Tories wiped out in Wales and Scotland, but they've almost been completely wiped out as a party of urban Britain. In the last Parliament, 76 of more than 200 seats in the big cities, London, the big English cities, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Cardiff, and so on. 76 MPs were Conservatives. Now it looks as though only 18 of those seats will be Conservatives. No Tories in Cardiff, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Leeds, Sheffield after today, just 1 in Birmingham, Norman Fowler in Southern Coalfields, a dozen perhaps in London out of more than 70 seats. Now, given that the Tories don't control local government in any of these areas, given their membership is falling, it seems to me the Conservatives have a real problem in reconstructing themselves as a party, as a national party at all. Hardly there in urban Britain, not there in Scotland or Wales. They're now completely a party of the suburbs and shires of England.
But those things are temporary phenomena, aren't they? I mean, that's the result. You know, every constituency you go to, there'll be a Conservative Party regrouping and reforming. When you say they're now a party of the shires, not at the next election, I assume. Or do you think that this is some fundamental change?
Well,
you don't, surely.
Possibly not. I think the next 2 or 3 years will be crucial. If we get the normal mid-term anti-government swing in local elections, maybe the Conservatives can start to claw back their position. But over the last few years, they've been almost completely wiped out. Not just they've lost cities they used to control, they've been wiped out, and their membership is full. All the things which create a functioning party at local level, you know, having councillors, having MPs, that has ceased to exist in large parts of Britain, and in particular in urban Britain. And I think that will make it incredibly difficult for them to rebuild their base.
Of course, we'll get the local council results for England tomorrow, and maybe that will show them making some gains, because they did very badly 4 years ago. So perhaps even there they'll gain 1 or 2 crumbs of comfort. Let's have a look at some of the Labour gains that we've had in recently. Northampton North, a 13% swing, the same old story. Now, this is Tony Marlow, the fellow in the blazer who stood behind John Redwood at the leadership campaign against John Major, stood with John Redwood, I should have said, when he challenged John Major a couple of years back. Jerry Hayes, colourful character, got into some problems just before the campaign began, with some accusations in the News of the World, which he's engaged in a libel action about. But the swing against him is just the same as everybody else's suffering, 13% there, and the seats taken by Bill Rammell, so that probably didn't have any effect on him. A colourful character in the House of Commons. Giles Brandreth, who claims to have made the longest after-dinner speech, which went on for 12 hours, 30 minutes, and got him into the Guinness Book of Records, but must have had all the dinner guests falling asleep, waking up, having breakfast, and he was still there on his feet talking. Anyway, he's now going, I suppose he'll take up that sort of life again, 11% swing against him in Chester. And a Labour gain in Watford. Swing in Watford of 12%, and this is Claire Ward, only 24 years old, the youngest ever elected MP to Watford. Jeremy.
David, I'm joined now by the Home Secretary, Michael Howard, from his count. Mr. Howard, what does it feel like to be part of an endangered species?
Well, this is a dark night for the Conservative Party. And I congratulate Mr. Blair on winning a very famous victory. But I think we should remember that he won that victory by promising not to dismantle the achievements of 18 years of Conservative government. I am proud of those achievements. I'm proud to be a Conservative. And the task of the Conservative opposition in the next Parliament will be to protect those achievements and to come up with new ways of meeting the challenges which will face the country, but ways which are consistent with and consistent and constant to our principles.
What will you tell the Prime Minister tomorrow or whenever you talk to him about how long he should stay leading the party?
I have always supported John Major. I will continue to support him for as long as he wishes to remain leader of the party.
So you won't stand for the leadership?
I would support John Major for as long as he wishes to remain leader of the Conservative Party.
If there were a vacancy, you would stand for it?
There is no vacancy, and I repeat, Jeremy, I will support John Major for as long as he wishes to remain leader of the party.
Well, there will be a vacancy, perhaps jolly soon. Will you stand for it?
There is no vacancy at the moment, as I say, I will support John Major for as long as he wishes to remain our leader.
After that, all bets are off?
There is no vacancy at the moment.
Right. What do you think, in policy terms, was your biggest mistake?
I don't think there is very much to be gained tonight by looking back. I want the Conservative Party to come together in this dark hour and to begin to look forward.
Right, okay.
I think that is a much more constructive approach.
Fine, all right. Looking forward, which policies do you have to change?
Well, I don't think that's a very sensible question to attempt to answer at 4 o'clock in the morning in the aftermath of these general election results. We will want to pause, we will want to reflect, and we will want to come up with new ways consistent with our principles of meeting the challenges which face the country. After all, it is the Conservative Party which has produced all the ideas which are now accepted on all sides of British politics as the best solutions. We've had a great defeat tonight. It is a dark night for the party. But all the ideas which others now talk about originated in the Conservative Party. And that intellectual path blazing is something which we shall continue to do.
Michael Howard, thank you. David?
Thank you.
I said that Claire Ward at 24 was the youngest MP ever. Before you start sending in postcards saying Pitt the Younger was Prime Minister at 24, let me say I meant the youngest in this Parliament. Now, Peter, we haven't looked at the Liberal Democrats for a bit, and they have been doing spectacularly well compared with at the last election. Can we have a look at how things are going for them?
They certainly have. I mean, they were one of their longer shots, as Michael Howard and Folkestone Hyde, but they just missed that one. Here, let me reintroduce you to the swingometer that shows the Tory MPs vulnerable to a swing of the Liberal Democrats over here. The average swing over the country as a whole to the Liberal Democrats along this gold line here is only 5%. You see, that kind of swing doesn't knock off many Tories, nor does a swing of really 4% or so more than that. This is where it gets very exciting for the Liberal Democrats, up here. And it's actually in seats like that, target seats for the Liberal Democrats, where they've been scoring very, very big swings indeed. Some remarkable swings. And it's all because of this tactical voting that's going on. Look at the swing in Newbury and Harrogate and Kingston. All the seats that they needed to pick up, very nearly all of them, they're actually picking up. They're very successful concentration of opposition votes to beat the Tory in each case. Now, here's the Lib Dem battleground. Those are the target seats thereafter. Those are their existing seats. Let's just see what's happened overall now for the Liberal Democrats. There we are. There's their old parliamentary representation there, just 18 seats in the old House of Commons, and their 50 target seats here. What's happened so far? These are the ones that declared, a few blanks still to be filled in, but they're holding all their old seats except 2 that they've lost to Labour, as we've heard earlier, and some that they're also losing to Labour, but not losing to Labour, but failing to take because Labour have taken them. Ceredigion again holding on with Plaid Cymru. The Tories holding on in places like Eastbourne and Wells and Dorset Mid, but all the other ones really going down to the Liberal Democrats. And we forecast that they'll hold 16 of their current seats and that they will capture a huge number of their target seats. We're going to have to bunch them together so we can see quite clearly how many they're going to gain. There we are. They're going to gain 29, we reckon, of their target seats to add to 16 of their existing seats, total of 45, twice the number any Liberal or Liberal Democrat leaders had since before the war.
Thanks, Peter. A couple of lucky Tories. Douglas Hogg, the Agriculture Minister, holds on in Sleaford, and Theresa Gorman very nearly defeated in Billericay, a huge swing against her, 18% swing against her, majority down from 21,000 to 1,300 in Billericay. But anyway, she made it. Jeremy.
Thank you, David. David Steele, 44 or so seats. How come you suddenly learned how to play first-past-the-post politics?
Well, I think it's a great achievement. I mean, I told you earlier, I sat in a parliament with 6 Liberals on the bench. The whole system of the House of Commons is going to have to change to accommodate a serious third party, not just a small minority irritant, but a party of between 40 and 50 seats really can't be treated the way that we have been over all these years. This is the best result since 1929, the flapper election of 1929. It's a great tribute to all those who've concentrated their fire on getting basically the same amount of votes that we got last time, but a lot more seats.
You might have done even better had you abandoned the pantomime that you were contesting every seat in Britain and hoping to form a government.
We had that argument, I seem to remember, during the campaign.
Yeah, you were maintaining stalwartly, stalwartly that you were hoping to form a government.
No, I didn't say that. What I said was we had to fight all the seats because the weight that we have in the House of Commons is backed up by the national vote.
The interesting thing is that when you stand against Labour, as we saw in Rochdale tonight, as we saw in Oldham, to a lesser extent in Inverness, you actually lose.
Well, the Labour tide throughout the whole country has knocked 1 or 2 of our seats out as well, and that's very sad, but I don't think there was much we could do to resist that tide. But the fact is that we have benefited from the anti-conservative swing, the mood for a change, and what we now have to do is to convert what has been a tiny minority party in the House of Commons into a serious parliamentary party of 40 to 50 people. That isn't going to be easy. It's got a tough task that Paddy Ashton has ahead of him.
It's also quite difficult when, as you conceded earlier, with this kind of majority, Labour doesn't need you, and they have also demonstrated that you can't really harm them.
I think, as Stephen Twigg said in his thank you speech, though, they're well aware that they benefited in a lot of their seats from the tactical vote, and he openly acknowledged the Liberal Democrat support that he had, and I think that's true in quite a number of the seats. So I think there will be a certain amount of goodwill between the parties across the floor of the House, and I hope that that will show itself in particular in changing the procedures. There's also the issue of what will happen in Scotland, where we now have no Conservatives at all, and we have major legislation coming up to recreate the Scottish Parliament. Now, I believe the Conservative Party seriously misread the situation in Scotland, from John Major downwards, the whole lot of them. It was the wrong tactic. They simply went against the grain of Scottish opinion, and now we're landed with a situation where we are going to have to be the opposition to the Labour Party in doing this legislation, try and make it right.
David Steele, thank you.
Theresa Gorman's result in Billericay. I said she just managed to hold on, and here is how she did it. Majority down to 1,356. The swing against her, 18%. Labour in second place on 20,000. And Theresa Gorman spoke at her count after the announcement of the result.
I will thank too all of those people on the doorsteps of Billericay and Wickford and Pitsea and Leindon, who time and again endorsed my view that we should keep the pound, that we should keep our independence, and that we should keep our border controls. And it is those policies which I shall continue to support in the new House of Commons. And I really do believe that the new Conservative Party grouping in the House of Commons will reinforce and restate those values, which I think are dear to the heart, not just of my constituency, but to the whole of the British nation. Thank you.
And Alan Clark's result in the safest Conservative seat in the United Kingdom, Kensington and Chelsea, but his majority down from 21,000 to 9,000, a swing of 13%. Alan Clark, who left the House of Commons at the last election and comes back in after publishing his notorious and successful diaries, on a swing of 13%. He's outside the Conservative Central Office in Smith Square with John Sopel.
Alan Clark, I wonder what your diary entry would be for tonight.
Well, it's a catastrophe for the party, of course. But, you know, we can't whinge about it. I mean, if the electorate speak, they speak. You've got to listen.
What happens now?
Well, I think the Conservative Party has got to have a period of quiet reflection and preferably well-disciplined, not slanging each other and certainly not getting into sort of competing positions for some future post.
The party was slanging each other when it was in government. It didn't even wait for opposition.
No, sure.
Presumably you think there's little chance of a seemly debate quietly done now, do you?
Well, I would hope there might be, because they've just got, this will bring them to their senses, I hope.
Is there a position on Europe, do you think, that the party can unite around?
Well, it'll have to find that position, won't it? I mean, if it can't, it is so much fewer in number now that if it can't unite, it really won't count for anything. So this has got to concentrate its mind.
Who should be the next leader?
Oh, that's a ridiculous question. I mean, we've got a leader, John Major. You heard him speak earlier. He spoke in the most moving way. He was head and shoulders above anybody else. And the idea that you just got to throw a leader out simply because he loses an election is quite new.
But it would be quite understandable if he felt that the last thing he wanted to do was...
If he feels he wants to go, that's down to him. But that's quite different from the party rejecting him, which I hope they won't do.
So you think it would be in the best interest of the party for John Majors to stay on?
Oh, it certainly would, yeah.
For how long?
Well, that's a matter for him to decide himself, and for the way the situation turns out. But right now, I very much hope he doesn't do anything precipitate. I think it would be a great pity.
I mean, you're a great historian of the Conservative Party. It's never been very kind to people who've lost elections.
Well, no, it sometimes holds on to them for a bit.
What's a bit?
Well, how long did Ted last? He lasted about...
a year.
Yes, a year. I mean, I think you must have at least a year of quiet contemplation and discipline, and probably not a very high profile. I mean, We've excited a very large swing against us. I don't think the public expect us to overperform now.
All right, Alan Clark, many thanks indeed.
Thanks.
David.
And we go down to Welwyn and Hatfield, where the count is just about to be announced, the result of it. Anna Ford is there. Anna? Well, David Evans is standing second left from the end there. I don't know whether Anna Ford can hear me. If she can.
Yes, I can, David.
Oh, good. Anna, take us through all this. What's the likely outcome of this?
The likely outcome is, I think, that Melanie Johnson is going to sweep the board, but we shall have to wait until the returning officer tells us the result. I think David Evans really has suspected all day that he was going to lose. He's certainly been looking far more gloomy off camera than he was on camera earlier this evening, and I think he blames the leadership of the Tory party and also the fact that they have let people down by breaking so many promises.
Michelle. I, Michelle Saminaden, being the acting returning officer for the constituency of Welwyn Hatfield, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election held on 1st May 1997 was as follows. Cox, Victor Ernest, Justice for Residents of Welwyn Hatfield, 1,263. Evans, David John, the Conservative Party candidate, 19,341. Harold, Helen Teresa, Pro-Life Alliance, 267. Johnson, Melanie Jane, the Labour Party candidate, 24,000. Now, $24,936. Schwartz Rodney Scott, Liberal Democrat, 7,161. And that Melanie Jane Johnson has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency of Welwyn Hatfield.
The millionaire David Evans, who owns Luton Town Football Club, and has been rude about everybody, including Virginia Bottomley on his own side, and his Labour opponent, who is extremely rude about her and her 3 children, has been defeated on a swing of 11%. Been the MP there since 1987. Himself a former professional footballer, very outspoken, always in the House of Commons referring to his wife Janice and her views on things. So let's hear the speech from Melanie Johnson, a school inspector and a magistrate.
It's been a tremendous night for people in Welwyn Hatfield and in Britain. I think this has been a very historic occasion, and it's almost one that's too much to take on board in one evening. The people of this country and in this constituency have made a break with the past and taken a tremendous step into a new future with the Labour Party. This is going to be a future where many will benefit, and we will have a society where people are included rather than excluded. It will be a future where education is the top priority, where the health service is nurtured for all, and where people...
Well, she was one of the women-only shortlist, about which we didn't hear very much after it had begun, when it was declared illegal. But there are a number of women who've got through tonight, who got through because of that women-only shortlist into the Labour Party. How are they running so far, Peter?
Well, there's going to be a revolution in the representation of women in the Commons, David. Let's just look inside the chamber and look at the number of women who were in the old House of Commons and compare that with the number that we expect now to be in the new House. Now, here we are just taking a bird's eye view, and we'll just pick out the women in the old House here. Women MPs on the Labour side, first of all. They're just clocking up there. 39 of them, and on the Conservative side there were 18. Now, we estimate that in the new House of Commons, looking at the Labour figure first, as you say, all women shortlists and the other seats that have been gained by Labour, 44 gains for Labour in terms of women in the House of Commons, something like doubling their representation. The Tories down 4, not surprisingly. But when you add on the Liberal Democrats expected to have women MPs and the SNP as well, the total down here then is 114, up 51. So it literally is just about double the number of women in the House of Commons. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Robert Atkins defeated, incidentally, the man who became briefly a minister, but also the man who plotted or planned with John Major how John Major would capture the leadership on a barge holiday. Anyway, he lost his seat in South Ribble. Now, Jeremy Vine joins us from the Festival Hall. Jeremy.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Yes, we're outside the Royal Festival Hall, where a crowd is beginning to gather in anticipation of Mr. Blair's arrival here. We gather he's about 25-30 minutes away. You can see the podium there that he'll be standing on and making a speech to what will be not just the press that you can see there, but also people who are inside the hall partying. They're about to come out to hear him. He'll make his way down here. He'll speak to the nation. He'll go inside again then and speak to his staff and thank them for all the work that they've done.
Now, Jeremy, just tell me before you go in there.
Well, inside it's getting increasingly noisy. People are now dancing a great deal, and I have to say the atmosphere is getting very relaxed and quite sultry in some corners of the hall. Gordon Brown has now arrived. Peter Mandelson has now arrived. It's very much that everybody's now expecting Tony Blair, and the expectation is, as you already know, that he will arrive in a few minutes' time.
Francine, how many people are there in truth at the Festival Hall? Can you hear me all right? How many people are there really?
Well, I don't have one of those brains that can actually count immediately, but I would say there are probably about 1,200 or so.
I mean, is it a serious big party with all London rushing down to the Festival Hall to celebrate Labour's victory at 4:30 in the morning, or is it the usual suspects having their celebration having been let out of Millbank at the end of the campaign?
Oh no, not at all, and it hasn't been from the outside. Obviously there were a lot of party workers there from at the beginning. Gradually the various sort of celebrities, large numbers of the cast of EastEnders and so forth came on, and now I would say that people who've been to other election night parties are coming on afterwards. And most immediately beside me now, I now have Peter Mandelson. Peter, now you don't tend to show a great deal of emotion about these things, however, you're allowed it now.
I'm very, very happy, very relieved and very exhilarated. Not just for all the people here, because they've done all the work, they've made this victory possible, but I'm very excited for the country, obviously, as well.
Now, you are, of course, the architect of this whole campaign.
Well, I'm one of them. I'm not the sole architect of anything.
But you won't be short of an opinion on this. What do you think was the point? What was the particular point that caused such a dramatic victory?
I think the main point is the creation of New Labour. You know, however awful the Tories are and all their divisions and their dogma and their drift, and heaven knows the country wanted to shake them off a long time ago, but it took the creation of New Labour and the final transformation of the party after this long 10-year struggle to remake ourselves that clinched it. People felt they could trust the Labour Party again. We were safe. They could come home to us. And when that happened, we were away.
But there are so many of you now that it is not going to be beyond possibility that you'll have your own divisions within the party. But I mean, in a sense, the struggle's just beginning.
Well, if there are little fissures appearing, I have every confidence that the BBC will be able to make that little bit wider and create problems for ourselves. But you know, we have a very clear programme. I mean, we worked out our manifesto, we published it a year ago. It received the full backing of our party on a one-member, one-vote ballot. And what people need to understand is that having been elected as New Labour, we are going to govern as New Labour. Nothing more and nothing less than the manifesto which the people of our country have voted for today.
It's good party here, obviously at the moment.
Great party.
Festival Hall. Is there a personal choice, presumably here, because the whole question of Festival of Britain and Herbert Morrison, your relative's role in it?
Well, I don't know whether, having managed this campaign, I'm going to exceed the majority gained by my own grandfather when he managed the Labour campaign in 1945. I don't know. I think a little bit of family pride would suggest that, would encourage me in thinking that perhaps we can get an even bigger majority in 45. I don't know. All I know is that we have now regained the trust of the British people, and we're not going to betray it.
And if you had to describe what the general complexion, demeanour of the new Labour government with this very large majority is going to be, how would you do that?
Very sober, very responsible, our feet placed very firmly on the ground, but now ready to roll up our sleeves and get on with the job.
Peter Mandelson, thanks very much.
Well, it certainly does look as if he is going to exceed the Labour majority. It was 136 in 1945, and they're heading for a majority of 183 now. Of course, the House of Commons is a little bit bigger, but not that much bigger. It's going to be a record night for the defeat of cabinet ministers, with the news that Tony Newton has been defeated in Braintree. The seat's been gained by Alan Hurst. Tony Newton, who was the leader of the House, a man who's been in office continually since 1979 when the Tories came in with Mrs. Thatcher, defeated on a 13% swing from Conservative to Labour. Good. Peter, how are we doing now?
With, well, I mean, Labour are doing extraordinarily.
Well, indeed, but who have you got for the chop?
Well, I'll cover that in just a moment. If I may just quickly show you the pattern of colour building up in the country now. Just look how it is incredible how Labour is coming back in the home counties in London and all around here in the Midlands. There's Martin Bell in Tatton, surrounded by Labour seats, just a few Tories there up in rural Cheshire. With the Liberal Democrats on 23 gains. Here they are, all flashing away now. You can see the Liberal Democrat gains flashing away, the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, South, Colchester, just about everywhere there. Liberal Democrats doubling their representation in the Commons. But it's, of course, Labour who are really on the move there. Tremendously successful election for Tony Blair, beating all the records. And here we have our final forecast of the way the country will look at the end of the day, with 45 Liberal Democrats and 421 Labour MPs. I mean, Labour have never been above 400 in history. Now, apart from Michael Portillo, we mentioned earlier there were quite a lot of personalities in the Tory party who were standing under that cliff, which, if it was a Labour landslide, would fall on top of them. Let's just see what's happened. There's our dicey dozen. We've had, let's see, 9, 10 of them now. Their seats have been declared, 2 more to come. What's happened? Well, there it goes. The landslide, the Labour landslide, has buried no fewer than 9 of the 10 of our dicey dozen so far. Just going to have a quick look at who they are. You'll recognise Jerry Hayes there on the right. Now, he's had the worst defeat of all. That's why he's up to his neck there. There's Tony Marlow in Northampton North. There's Giles Brandreth, Michael Forsyth, the Scottish Secretary, another Cabinet Minister Ian Lang, another one, Malcolm Rifkind. And there is Nick Budgeon, David Mellor, another Cabinet Minister, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, William Waldegrave, and the Home Secretary, as I mentioned earlier, just surviving the Liberal Democrat surge. They didn't quite manage to get as far as him in Folkestone and Hyde. But of course, it's gone beyond that, even beyond our so-called dicey dozen. The vulnerable Tories we thought might go down to a 9% swing. The swing, of course, has been far bigger than that. And it's carried with it people like Neil Hamilton in Tatton, as we saw earlier. There's the Norman Lamont, the former Chancellor. There's David Hunt in West Wirral. I mean, very, very safe seats, these, many of them. Marcus Fox in Shipley, he's gone down. Jeremy Hanley, beaten in Richmond Park. And finally, in Braintree there, Tony Newton going down to defeat in a really very, very safe Conservative seat, David. And, of course, Michael Portillo in Enfield Southgate. Devastating for them.
Thanks very much, Peter. Well, let's rejoin for a moment Frank Skinner.
Help me, David. I'm in a club for young people in Manchester and there's strange smoke in the air and I don't know what's going on. I've got E on my jacket and people keep asking me for things. And I'm so tired, someone outside thought I was Margaret Beckett. But anyway, here's some young people. What do you think about the election so far?
I think it's great. They deserve it.
Good, well, that's fair enough. What do you think, mate?
Yeah, I think it's cool as long as Labour is a change, you know what I mean?
Well, I think it will be a change. We'll find out this for the better or for the worse.
For the better, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Moved a little to the right, but let's see anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
cool.
just a little bit, though. Is there any Tory voters here at all?
No Tories.
This is a fair Gallup poll for the whole nation there. What do you think, mate?
Well, they can all stand, but only one can deliver. One, Labour. That's it, sorry. That's all I can say.
That's pretty good stuff, though. I enjoyed that. So is there anyone who thinks that John Major will still have a good job in politics? What do you think?
Absolutely not. I think he should retire gracefully.
Oranges and stockings for John Major.
They say cleaning the Houses of Commons is pretty nice, you know what I mean?
OK, then, well, there you have the view of the youth of England. Bye, David.
Frank Skinner. And let's now hear from Martin Bell. He had a very healthy victory in Tatton over Neil Hamilton, 11,000 votes, and afterwards is talking to Vivian White.
I was expecting a wafer-thin margin one way or the other. The canvass I did tonight was just fantastic. It looked as if whole communities were moving over to me, but I still didn't know. And yes, I'm astonished and gratified and actually rather humbled by what happened here.
Neil Hamilton, your defeated opponent, said, as you heard in his speech, that when Sir Gordon Downey's full report on what actually took place is published, that he'll be vindicated. Now, you claim you stood as the independent candidate for higher standards in public life. Have you smeared and wrecked the reputation of Neil Hamilton?
No, I absolutely have not. I did not campaign at all on the charges that are not yet resolved. I campaigned on what was already out there in the public record, and I categorized that generally as conduct unbecoming to a member of Parliament, and that's out there, and that won't be affected by the Downey report.
If he should be vindicated, as he says he will, by Sir Gordon Downey, what will you do by then as the elected MP who replaced him?
Well, he can't be vindicated on what is already out there on the record. It's just not possible.
Have you any regrets at all, or none, for Mr. Hamilton and for his wife?
I have some sympathy for them in being hounded by the press. I've had a little bit of that since I announced, and it's been very difficult for them. But I have to say that I think to some extent Mr. Hamilton brought this upon himself, and for that matter, upon his party.
You claimed that you acted independently. Do you think that, nevertheless, you may have been used by both the Labour Party and by the Liberal Democrats nationally, and wonderfully distracted attention from many other issues during the campaign, so that they concentrated on the issue of, in quotes, sleaze instead?
Well, that would have gone away if, as I expected, Mr. Hamilton had withdrawn his candidature or been asked by his party to stand down. I expected 48 hours in politics, and it said it looks as if I got 4 and 5 years. But no, I have not been manipulated. I have not been used. I could not have won this if I hadn't got at least 10,000 Conservative votes. So I think I've been supported in almost equal numbers by voters who would normally vote with all three main parties.
When you arrive in Parliament, do you think MPs of all parties will have reason to be terrified of Martin Bell sitting there on the back benches, so independent of mind?
Well, he hasn't actually found a bench to sit on yet, because there isn't a crossbench. I think there'll be a certain amount of goodwill. I understand it's a clubbable sort of place. I shouldn't be a threat to any of them, and I see no harm in having the first real independent in Parliament in a couple of generations.
Let's have a look at the story in Wales. We've said the Tories are wiped out there. Glyn Mathias joins us from Cardiff.
Labour have long dominated the political map of Wales. Tonight they dominate it as never before. So far they've secured 34 seats out of the 40 seats in Wales. By comparison, the Conservatives face a wipeout. They secured just 18% of the vote. They've lost 7 seats, including those of 2 ministers. But the brightest Labour smiles came when they captured the safest Conservative seat in Wales, Clwyd West.
Roderick Richards, 13070. Gareth Thomas, 14918.
Rod Richards was the minister who resigned after allegations over his private life. Plaid Cymru, they managed to hold on to all 4 seats that they secured in 1992. There had been some question mark over one, Ynys Môn.
Jones, Ieuan Wyn, Plaid Cymru,
15,756. 15,756. Owen William Goronwy Vaughan, y Blaid Geidwadol, the Conservative Party, 8,569. 8,569. A datganad yma fod Ieuan Wyn Jones wedi ei ethol fel aelod seneddol.
So Plaid Cymru held Ynys Môn, but they failed to secure their main target seat of Carmarthen East and Nivor. The Liberal Democrats held on to Montgomeryshire, but they have to wait till tomorrow to find out whether they can capture Brecon and Radnorshire, the last seat to be declared in Wales. Little chance there of the Conservatives holding it.
Glyn Mathias from Cardiff. Well, now we're joined by the BBC's economics editor, who was up in Dunfermline with the man who's going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown, flew down with him to Stansted, and presumably on the way down had a chance to talk to him about what on earth he was going to do as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and maybe can tell us a little bit about that. Peter Jay. Peter, good evening. What did you garner on your journey down with Gordon Brown?
Well, he was obviously a very happy man, but he's also a man on whom the mantle of government was visibly descending. He was beginning to talk like a chancellor. There seemed to be no question that he expected to go to the Treasury, indeed to be there probably by tomorrow afternoon. I think he was expecting that Tony Blair would be officially Prime Minister by about 2 p.m. and that he would be at his desk in the Treasury or number 11 studying the papers, talking to Sir Terence Byrne pretty soon after, that other cabinet and government appointments would be made over the weekend, and that by next week they would be fully at it. He was expecting to receive the Governor of the Bank of England at a meeting at the Treasury already set for the middle of next week. He wasn't going to tell me, needless to say, what decisions he would make about interest rates, but he will probably receive the same advice as Ken Clarke did, that interest rates, in the Governor's opinion, ought to be higher. And then he'll basically be getting down to work on his first budget, which he's promised to produce within a couple of months, which is partly, of course, to introduce the windfall tax. But the very important part of it in his mind are all the
Peter, let me interrupt you
things.
just a minute, and I'll come back to you. I'm sorry. We've just got pictures of Paddy Ashdown arriving at Liberal Democrat Party headquarters, and great Lord Home there beside him, who planned the campaign. We want Paddy, the shouts are.
Okay. You can have Paddy in just a moment, but I wanted to say 2 thank yous. First of all, to Peter Boyzo, who's been a wonderful host this evening.
They're at the Pizza on the Park, which is run by Peter Boyzo, just by Hyde Park Corner in London.
And second, I want to say thank you to a terrific campaign team. We deserve this result, but it's you who worked for it so hard who really get the credit. But most of all, the person who gets the credit, and he deserves it. What a campaign. Paddy.
So the Liberal Democrats heading for 45 seats in the new Parliament. 25 gains. They've got 37 at the moment. They've only lost 2 seats. And on a vote of 16.5%, not nearly as good as they got last time in the popular vote, but in seats they've scored magnificently tonight. More than doubling their standing.
I see we bought the high-tech soapbox all the way, but not at this stage the helicopter. Richard, the whole of the campaign team, you have been absolutely stunning. I can't tell you what it's been like out there, and I know I speak for all my parliamentary colleagues, and there are now many more than there were before. The way that you have fought this campaign under the superb direction of Richard, who's done so stunningly for all of us. And now we have a lot of work to do. We are the largest force of Liberal Democrats and Liberals that this country has had since the days of Lloyd George. And we will use that force, we will use the vote that people have given us in the next Parliament with a hugely increased number of Liberal Democrat members of Parliament to fight every minute, every second, every hour through the next Parliament for those things that we have campaigned for in this election. Education and investing in education, tackling the crisis of our health service, bringing a new kind of honesty to our politics, and you know they told us we couldn't do it and win votes, but we did. And fighting now to be the cornerstone, the rock upon which we can build a new and modern constitution for our country that will begin to rebuild the bridge between the government and the governed, and bring about, ladies and gentlemen, bring about, colleagues, what I believe will be a parliament of historic reform in this country in the years ahead.
Norfolk South West declaring
Shepherd,
Mrs. Gillian Shepherd's seat.
Patricia,
Conservative.
24,694.
The Education and Employment Secretary just squeaking in Norfolk South West.
And that Gillian Patricia Shepherd has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency. The number of ballot papers rejected and not counted by me at this election were as follows. Want of official mark, 0. Voting for more than one candidate, 82. Writing or mark by which voter could be identified, 0. Unmarked or void for uncertainty, 313, giving a total of 395 votes. Thank you.
I would just like to thank very warmly the returning officer, his staff, the people who have counted the votes and who are here much later than they expected to be, the police for keeping us all safe during this campaign, my opponents with whom it has been possible to have a civilized and proper campaign and debate on a number of occasions, and of course, most especially, all my helpers, all my supporters, my agent, my family, and of course the many, many people who voted Conservative in South West Norfolk this time. Not for the first time, South West Norfolk has shown it has bucked a regrettable trend. This has been a remarkable night. It has been a historic night, but I'm delighted that it is a night that has been marked by South West Norfolk remaining true blue.
She's done well to hold on to Norfolk South West. The swing, 14% would have unseated her, and we've seen that kind of swing in other places. But she's held on. And meantime, at the Festival Hall, where at 10 to 5 in the morning, things are picking up a bit. John Prescott, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and Robin Cook on the left there, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, arriving at the Festival Hall to take part in these celebrations. And Tony Blair is on his way there. We expect him there just after 5 o'clock. We'll go there, of course, as soon as he's there. And Neil Kinnock, for whom this must be a bittersweet occasion when he thinks how close he came or might have come to this at the last election, now working in Europe as a commissioner and here celebrating with great good heart a really remarkable, quite extraordinary, beyond his wildest dreams anyway, victory for the Labour Party. And now we rejoin our economics editor, Peter Jay, who we were talking to a moment ago. Peter, before we were interrupted, just on the politics for a moment, did he say anything to you about the scale of this majority and express any concern about it, or simply jubilation?
Well, I don't think there's much doubt that he was thrilled by it. Obviously, like any thinking politician, he was aware of the fact that there would be quite a lot of people there, perhaps 100 members, who would regard themselves as having been somewhat freakishly elected, may not have even expected to be elected, and might well not expect to be re-elected in any circumstances less favourable than those of this very remarkable result tonight, and that those might be people who were somewhat more difficult to discipline, control and predict than the ordinary run of more or less professional politicians who are to be found in the Labour Party and in most political parties nowadays.
So what's he got to decide immediately? Is he going to change the Governor of the Bank of England within a week or so? Do you know what he's going to do on any of these big issues?
I certainly don't know what he's going to do about the Governor of the Bank of England. I have no reason to think that he's going to change. He certainly seemed to expect to meeting him next week and to receiving his advice on interest rates and reaching his own decision. That is one of the big decisions he's got to make. He's got to decide whether he's worried about the extreme strength of the pound and the threat that that poses to the recovery. I don't think he is very impressed by the robustness or the success so far of Ken Clarke's recovery. I think he is very impressed by the strength of the economic recovery in the United States, Bill Clinton's recovery. He was interested in discussing how that had come about.
Peter,
we thought that probably Alan Greenspan had had a lot to do with that.
I'm going to have to interrupt you once again. I'm sorry, we're getting the result from Derbyshire South. Edwina Currie's seat, or at least up until this moment, Edwina Currie's seat.
Charles, Liberal Democrat, 5,408, 5408. Todd Mark Wainwright, the Labour Party candidate, 32709. And I hereby declare that Mark Wainwright Todd has been duly elected to serve as the member for the said constituency.
Well, it can be no surprise to Edwina Currie that she's lost her seat there. It needed a tiny swing against her. It was number 20 in Labour's target, and instead of a tiny swing, she got a 13% swing against her. So Edwina Currie, forceful character, novelist. Remember, she was the person who was kicked out of office over the salmonella and eggs crisis. She's been the MP there since 1983. Very pro-European, very outspoken, supporter of John Major, very critical of those in the party who've made life difficult for him on the European front, and failed candidate for the European Parliament as well. So she is. Tony Blair, in the meantime, is on his way down to London, flying in to go to the party at the Festival Hall with Sherry there, his wife, on the way down. Seems to be already at work. Cups of teas, not champagne. In fact, the whole way that Labour has treated this so far, apart from occasional bursts of energy at the Festival Hall on the Follett's failure to open a bottle of champagne at Stevenage, has been rather muted, as though they'd been so well disciplined for the campaign and so orderly that now that they've got a victory on a huge scale, they're rather staggered by it. Alistair Campbell, his press secretary there, also sipping a cup of tea. A serious moment for them as they plan what they're going to do when they go to number 10 and have to form a cabinet and then a whole government. But it's interesting that this spirit of rather modest determination through the campaign seems to have lasted. No exuberance, no sudden burst of energy. This is Tony Blair now arriving at the airfield at Stansted after that brief flight down from Sedgefield, where he had been at his count, and he's on his way to the Festival Hall, where we'll rejoin him. Photographers calling for him to be photographed. And outside the Royal Festival Hall, a crowd has now gathered, cheering and waiting for Tony Blair to arrive. Well, that's a bit sparklier than the scenes we saw before. Singing the campaign song, it can only get better. And as we come up to 5 o'clock in the morning and dawn just breaking over London, the sky turning blue, this crowd waiting for Tony Blair and Cherie Blair to arrive here. Trevor Nunn there, the theatrical director of the National Theatre. Now, Jeremy, you're Neil Kinnock and John Prescott there. Jeremy, we're going to get a political speech or a celebration here, do you think? It's rather either late at night or early in the morning for a heavy-going political speech, I should have thought. He must be talked out, isn't he?
Sorry, David, it's so loud here, I can't actually hear you. This is a massive celebration by these Labour staff members and supporters who've come here. We've seen pictures of Neil Kinnock and Peter Mandelson, the party strategist, John Prescott, the deputy leader, all staying off the stage at the moment, standing to the left of it, waiting for Mr. Blair, who we think is maybe about 10 minutes away.
Well, we'll go back to the festival hall when Mr. Blair arrives, and we'll hear his speech and see all those members of the shadow cabinet, soon to be the cabinet, who've arrived down there, and listen to what he has to say. But while we wait for that, Dr. Brian Mawhinney is with Emma Udwin at his count at Cambridgeshire North West.
Dr. Mawhinney, what do you put this extraordinary defeat down to?
The British people decided that it was time for a change. That is a very clear message from tonight's results. All over the country, it would appear at first sight that they looked for the candidate in this constituency that had the best chance of ousting a Conservative. And that's how they voted. And it has been a very good night for the Labour Party. I congratulate Mr. Blair and the Labour Party. I wish them well as they govern.
Well, you almost expect Neil Kinnock to say, we're all right. Peter Mandelson, who's no mean dancer himself, at the front there. Atmosphere building up as we wait for Tony Blair's arrival. Apologies to Brian Mawhinney, who we lost there in order to come back here. We'll go back to Brian Mawhinney in just a moment, but there are three of the most senior figures in the Labour Party: Neil Kinnock on the left, and John Prescott, the Deputy Leader, soon probably to be Deputy Prime Minister, and Peter Mandelson, the MP for Hartlepool, no post at the moment, the man who reinvented the Labour Party. And behind Peter Mandelson, Pauline Prescott, John Prescott's wife, Robin Cook. Between Kinnock and Prescott there. You can sense the feeling of exuberance and relief after the struggle to win this election, after the past 18 years when they've seen the Labour Party go from the disastrous defeats of 1983 and 87, and then the almost success of 92, which ended so badly for them with a apparent last-minute change in the mind of the electorate. And then this time round, when at the beginning of the campaign, all these people who were working for the party were so uncertain and nervous about it and tense lest it go wrong, and one moment in the campaign when they thought perhaps it might start to unscramble, and then to discover not only has it not gone wrong, but it's exceeded their wildest dreams in terms of the kind of majority that Labour's going to get. 183 we're talking about now as the projected majority, and no wonder they're exuberant. Now let's rejoin Brian Mawhinney in Cambridgeshire North West, the chairman of the Conservative Party and the man who was the principal architect of their campaign.
It would appear at first sight that they looked for the candidate in this constituency that had the best chance of ousting a Conservative. And that's how they voted. And it has been a very good night for the Labour Party. I congratulate Mr. Blair and the Labour Party. I wish them well as they govern our country, for all of us want our country well governed. in opposition, we will support them when we think they're acting in the national interest. We'll oppose them with, I hope, rational argument when they are not, in our view. But all of that is for tomorrow. It's very clear that the British people decided that after 18 years, and irrespective of the fact that we've got the best economy, probably for 2 generations, that it was time for a change of government. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you accept victory and defeat. I hope both with good grace.
Is there anything that you now wish you'd done differently in terms of policy or strategy?
Well, I heard you say earlier that most people will form a view that this was a reflection of the last 5 years in various aspects and not the last 5 weeks. And my instinct is that that was probably a right judgment. But we will get to all of those issues in due course.
Have you spoken to John Major? Are you urging him to stay on?
I have spoken to the Prime Minister on a number of occasions during the course of the evening, and you would expect me to give him any advice that he might or might not seek in private, not in front of the television.
What are your thoughts this evening for those colleagues who will not be returning to the House of Commons?
I'm very, very sad indeed. They have been good representatives of their constituents, some of them over many years. A number of them have served this nation illustriously.
Well, down at Tory party headquarters, Michael Portillo. The Defence Secretary has turned up, having lost his seat. William Hague, Welsh Secretary, one of the people who might well challenge for the leadership and who would have been a rival of Michael Portillo. And there's very prolonged applause for Mr. Portillo, who behaved very graciously at Enfield Southgate. And maybe is going to speak.
Thank you very much. Got consent. We're waiting for the Prime Minister.
Rather brief speech. And apparently, according to William Hague at any rate, they're waiting for the Prime Minister to come. I don't know whether we're expecting him to come tonight. We think they're both, John Major and Tony Blair, are going
What a night, huh?
to their headquarters, or rather Tony Blair going to the Festival Hall. So Tony King, what do you think as you watch these scenes? And we've talked at the very beginning of this programme, the last, probably the last, well certainly now the last general election of this century, and it goes out on this note. How do you place this election in the sort of post-war years?
Well, it is certainly the most remarkable landslide, though as I said right at the beginning of the program, I think landslide isn't quite strong enough a word that we've had since the war. How we're going to place this election is going to depend very much on the next few years, because we know very little about how a Labour government is actually going to operate, and we tend to judge elections retrospectively. One thing we can say, by the way, is that turnout is almost certainly going to be the lowest since the war. Brian Mulroney repeated the point about time for a change. I really think that the Conservatives ought not to comfort themselves in quite that way. Maybe it was time for a change 5 years ago. The core fact is that this government over time earned the contempt of the majority of the British people for the way it governed the economy in the first few years, for the sleaze that we've heard about several times tonight, for its disunity over Europe, and it also, I think, caused an awful lot of people to want to wreak revenge on the Conservative Party.
But that makes it, I mean, if that's the correct diagnosis, it makes it very difficult for them to find a way of recovery or getting back, because if it was a matter of resolving your views on a single currency, then it's a political point which you can have a battle about and maybe resolve or maybe not. But if it's about sleaze and incompetence and those kind of things, it's not that easy for them to change.
I think it's going to be very difficult indeed. Not only are they divided, but there are actually no clear lessons to be learned from this experience.
Except to sit around and wait for Labour to make a mistake.
It's almost as bad as that. The one point that I think one ought to add is that the Eurosceptics have been insisting all along that if only the government had adopted a firm, clear Eurosceptical line, the Conservatives would have done better. Well, an awful lot of individual Conservative candidates adopted exactly that line and said in their election addresses that they would oppose a single currency and so on. The results of tonight make it clear that those candidates have done just as badly as non-Eurosceptical candidates. There appear to have been no votes in Euroscepticism at all. We saw Norman Lamont go down, we saw Nick Budgeon go down, we saw Theresa Gorman in terrible trouble.
So, Robin Oakley, where do you think the fault lines are in the Tory party? I mean, if it's not just a matter of Euroscepticism or Europhilia, where are they actually going to, how are they going to sort themselves out?
Well, as you were saying earlier, the problem is that I think Sleaze had an awful lot to do with this defeat, in the sense that Time for a Change was a strong current already playing. It was playing at the last election. It seemed to be enough for the electorate at the last election that they'd changed Margaret Thatcher for John Major, and perhaps they bucked the odds in '92. But Sleaze and the way it accumulated through this Parliament fed into the whole idea of a tired old administration whose standards were slipping.
Do you think John Major has any feeling for that? Do you think he'll rue the day that he failed to be tougher from the start? I mean, on David Mellor, way back, when he said he was going to stay and then he was forced to resign, and onwards through the Neil Hamilton affair, all the other people, the people who took cash for questions and didn't lose the Tory whip, all the catalogue of complaints, the 16 ministers or more who left his government. Do you think, looking back, he'll think, well, maybe I should have done it different?
Perhaps in retrospect he will, because it's always been his technique to set up commissions, inquiries, to have things sorted out over a period. Perhaps he should have been quicker and more decisive in tackling it.
Do you think he'll think that?
I think he may well, as he analyses what has gone wrong for the Conservatives over this period. It may well be something that he thinks he could have handled in a different way.
As always at public events down at the Royal Festival Hall, there are false starts. We thought that Tony Blair was arriving, but we haven't been able to see him, but we'll keep an eye on that. And rather like the last night of the proms, any movement on stage, I think, leads to applause. But we'll keep it up there on the screen, and we're also keeping an eye for Smith Square, where John Major is expected to arrive. And the moment either does, there is the sign of a rather grand motor car arriving, which may well be Tony Blair. I think it is. Already signs of a security operation going on around him, but Tony Blair and Cherie Blair. Tom Sawyer just behind there with Alistair Campbell, slapping each other on the back, the General Secretary of the Labour Party, and he goes down through the line of his supporters. And you can see here what a personal triumph this is for Tony Blair, and is going to be treated as a personal triumph for Tony Blair by the party. Everybody said that if he wins, he'll have no problem, because even those who were dubious about the way that he was controlling the party and leading it will give him the credit for the victory if they really win, and they've won so handsomely that the whole party for the moment is likely to be bound up in the victory. Neil Kinnock congratulating him, Mrs. Prescott congratulating him, John Prescott there, his deputy leader. New government, and no doubt he may be thinking a new dawn as the sun comes up over the South Bank on the River Thames at the Festival Hall. And the man who will tomorrow take on the burdens of office, today celebrates his party's victory.
Thank you. Thank you, Lady Chancellor. Thank you very much indeed. Well,
this is a man who's won the largest Labour majority ever, bigger than 1945 when they had 147 seats. This time it's heading for 183. An astonishing recovery for the party and a tribute to the single-mindedness with which this man has pursued the aim of making his party acceptable and electable.
a new dawn has broken, has it not? And it is wonderful. We always said that if we had the courage to change, then we could do it, and we did it. And let me say this to you. The British people have put their trust in us. It is a moving and it is a humbling experience. And the size of our likely majority now imposes a special sort of responsibility upon us. We have been elected as New Labour, and we will govern as New Labour. We were elected because as a party today, we represent the whole of this nation. And we will govern for the whole of this nation, every single part of it. We will speak up for that decent, hard-working majority of the British people whose voice has been silent for all too long in our political life. And we'll set about doing the good, practical things that need to be done in this country. Extending educational opportunity, not to an elite, but to all our children. Modernising our welfare state, rebuilding our National Health Service as a proper National Health Service to serve the needs of Britain. We will work with business to create that dynamic and enterprising economy we need, and we will work with all our people for that just and decent society that the British people have wanted for so long. This vote tonight has been a vote for the future, for a new era of politics in Britain, so that we can put behind us the battles of this past century and address the challenges of the new century. It will be a Britain renewed, where through education and technology and enterprise, we equip our country for the future in a different and new economic world, and where we build a nation united, with common purpose, shared values, with no one shut out, no one excluded, no one told that they do not matter. In that society, tolerance and respect will be the order of the day, as we watch our children grow in strength and our elderly rest easy and secure in old age. That is the country we have wanted for so long. A Britain whose politics starts once again to live up to the finest ideals of public service. And a Britain that stands tall in the world, whose sense of its future is as certain and confident as its sense of its own history. Today, on the eve of this new millennium, the British people have ushered in this new era of politics. And the great thing about it is that we have won support in this election from all walks of life, from all classes of people, from every single corner of our country. We are now today the People's Party. The party of all the people, the many, not the few. The party that belongs to every part of Britain, no matter what people's background or their creed or their colour. The party that can stand up for what is a great country. And I want everyone to feel proud in their country tonight because they all have a stake in its success. I believe in Britain, and tonight the people of Britain are uniting behind New Labour. They are uniting around basic British values, uniting to put the divisions of the past behind us, uniting to face the challenges of the future, uniting at long last as one nation. 3 days ago, I quoted one of my predecessors, John Smith. He said, "All we ask is the chance to serve." Tonight, the British people have given us the chance to serve, and serve we will, with all our heart and all our mind. And to you, all of you that have come here this evening, I say thank you for all your work and for all your help. It's been a long journey for this party, has it not? It's been a long journey. I'm delighted that Neil Kinnock is here tonight as well. Neil took us back from the brink of extinction and helped make this party what it is today. And it is with real pride that we, all the people here, young and old, from every part of the country, from every background, we say tonight, you, the British people, have given us the chance to serve you. You have put your trust in us, and we say to you, we shall repay that trust for you. We govern for you. Finally, all these years, we have been people saying but never given the chance to do. And yet the only purpose in being in politics is to do, to get things done, to make things happen. Now we have the chance to make things happen. And we take that responsibility upon us, and we say we shall discharge it, and we shall make this country as proud of us as tonight we are proud of them. Thank you very much, everyone.
Tony Blair outside the Festival Hall on the South Bank, making a speech which he's made many times on the stump, slightly revamped for this victory moment. Not an emotional speech thanking all the party workers and supporters who've gathered there, but more a restatement of policy and intention with this huge majority. Sherry, his wife, Sherry Booth, the lawyer beside him, and an enthusiastic welcome from Labour Party workers and supporters who've come here in the early hours of the morning as the dawn breaks. Well, I don't know what you thought, Robin Oakley. I thought that was rather a slightly stilted way of dealing with a victory party. It's not at all what you'd expect, a sort of restatement of all the policy lines.
Well, I think Mr. Blair was very conscious that he was speaking to the nation outside as well as to his own
5:30 in the
party
morning?
work as
Come
well.
on, pull the other one.
Assuming that they're all still watching us here, David, I'm sure he was conscious of that. But it's been... The whole Labour campaign has been one of careful reassurance. Remember that image that Roy Jenkins produced at the beginning of the campaign? There was Mr. Blair carrying this precious crystal vase along a long, slippery corridor. Well, he's got there to the end of the corridor with the crystal vase, and he didn't even then dare to do a little pirouette with it still in his hands.
There's
perhaps.
something a bit sort of tight-laced or uptight about the way that they handle ideas and handle the sort of expression of it.
We did see him once or twice, though, towards the end of the campaign, out on the stump, cutting loose and getting some more emotion into it. But they've been conscious themselves, I think, of how it has been a rather safety-first campaign. We suddenly got this colour purple creeping into Labour's advertisements and background and so on, and that was, they said, to symbolise the passion that was behind it all. But they've had to be so disciplined in order to get where they have, to create new Labour and to convince the public they have changed.
Certainly the crowd there is very exuberant as John Prescott, Tony Blair walked down being congratulated by the crowd. It's not until tomorrow morning, round about midday, that he goes to the palace to, in the formal expression, kiss hands with the Queen and take over as Prime Minister. Tony King.
I think one of the reasons that...
Just a second, we have the arrival of John Major down at Smith Square. And this is the headquarters of the Conservative Party. Party workers who've been busy planning and plotting their campaign and have faced a defeat on a really quite dramatic scale tonight. We expect Mr. Major to speak to the party workers here before going back for the last time to number 10. Meets Michael Portillo, who's been defeated tonight. Alan Duncan, who is one of his close supporters during the campaign. Sympathy for Mr. Major, who's always been rather admired by the people who come in contact with him in the party. Now we expect him to speak.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, above all, for all you've done in the last few weeks and the last few months. I know how hard so many of you have worked. I know how much you have sacrificed, given up, hoped, dreamed for a different result and a different outcome tonight. It hasn't proved that way. I don't think there was much that we left undone that we could have done. There are some times in politics when the ball just rolls in the opposite direction and there isn't a great deal that you can do about it. I don't think it is in our best interests to spend our time in the immediate future doing anything other than preparing for what lies ahead, not just in the short term, but in the medium term. Politics is a rough old trade. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But when you don't, you just step back, ask yourself why you didn't, and put yourself in a position to make sure that next time...
Yes.
Next time.
Tory telecom reforms.
That next time you get it right, and you do win. I've been in the Conservative Party for as long as I can remember. I guess many of the people in this room joined the Conservative Party as soon as they could as well. And we joined it for the same reasons. We didn't join it just for the nights when you win, just for the easy victories from time to time. We didn't join it for the office. We didn't join it for the spoils. We joined it because we care about what it stands for, and we care about what it can do for this country. Now, we have been in being as a party for longer than any other democratic party in Western Europe. We've won more elections. We've lost a few on the route. But we've won more elections, and we have perhaps served in government longer, more often, and better in the interests of our country than any other democratic. And we will do so again. Tonight we have suffered a very bad defeat. Let us not pretend to ourselves it was anything other than what it was. Unless we accept it for what it was and look at it, we will be less able to put it right. We've lost some very good servants of the party, people who've devoted a huge amount of their life to the service of this country and the service of this party. We've lost, temporarily I hope, some colleagues, both senior and not so senior, who still have a lot of service to give this country and this party, and who will, I hope, be back where they should be, in the House of Commons, serving us all. And they lost, from what I saw of it, with a dignity that made me as proud of this party as I have been aware. We now have a job to do, all of us.
It's those reforms again, John, it's those reforms again.
They tell me the technological age is a good thing. Forgive me if from time to time I just have a small leave to doubt whether that is absolutely entirely true. We'll have to regroup. We'll have to sit back. I hope everybody will go away, have a rest. You've earned it. Not for too long. And then we'll begin to work again. There's a job to do in opposition. To be in opposition in Parliament is a pretty honourable way of life. To make sure that the government of the day is kept under close scrutiny. We'll deal fairly. If they do what we think is right for our country, we'll support them. If they do what we think is wrong for our country, then we'll oppose them as vigorously as we can with every member we have and every party worker we have up and down the country. So I know tonight is not a light night for cheers and champagne for us. It's a night perhaps to look back, I hope with some pride, at the changes that we have made to our country in the last 18 years. I first entered Parliament 18 years ago tomorrow, I think. And the difference in our country is a difference you could not express unless you remembered what it was like in May of 1979 when the Conservatives first came to government. Many people who voted in this general election perhaps never knew that, for they have never known anything in their adult lives but Conservative government. And others perhaps have not remembered precisely what it was like. Well, I said a moment ago that this party had served longer in government than any other. We've suffered great defeats before. We have always come back. We have always come back. And we have always come back because there is something in the Conservative philosophy and the Conservative instinct that runs absolutely with the grain of the British instinct. We must make sure we rediscover that, not just in the interests of our party, but in the interests of our country. So there is a great deal of work to do. I would just say three final things. Firstly, perhaps I can reiterate to this group here all these faces I've come to know so well, in some cases over many years, in some cases more recently. If you will forgive me repeating something I said a little earlier, and you may possibly have seen, I think perhaps here of all places is a good place to pay tribute to some of the people who have done so much to help over recent years. The party chairman, not here now, but on his way here, and I hope shortly here. Those of our colleagues whom we have lost, and on a more personal basis, though I have temporarily mislaid her, Norma. So, right, okay, we lost. So we... Go
on, John.
So go away for the weekend, relax, fire yourself up again, and then come back. Because when you come back, at the beginning of next week, we've got a job, and we better start doing it then. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister at Smith Square, absolutely no sign of, or no indication rather, that he's thinking of stepping down, talking about getting on with a job of recovery as he goes up the stairs there where Mrs. Thatcher stood and said they were going to win the cities after the election in '87. So John Major making a speech thanking them all, saying quite frankly they'd lost, but as I say, no indication that he's thinking of standing down. We don't know what he'll do. Now, Peter, let's have a look at how this victory has been won by Labour, where it was won, how it was won, and the scale of it.
The job John Major has to do to win back the country is really quite dramatic, and it's even more frightening for the Tories when you look at details like this, for example. Mr. Blair's great pitch was to win Middle England. And look what he's done. In working class seats, 9% the swing was there, whereas in the middle class seats, in Middle England seats, suburban seats, the seats where all these vital marginal areas were, a 12%, a massive 12% swing. That's twice the biggest swing we've had by any part of the nation since the war, a 12% swing in those middle class seats. Look also at the regional spread of the vote. Now, this is the lead in 1992, Labour's lead in Scotland, the North and Wales, a huge Tory lead in that fortress in the South, Midlands and London. Labour's never won the general election without winning a majority of the vote in London. Now look what's happened this time. Look how the lead has, of course, jumped in Scotland, the North and Wales, but in the Midlands, critical, Middle England, 12% lead for Labour. In London, an 18% lead for Labour. There are going to be 11 Conservative MPs left in London, all the 74 MPs. Only 1/7 of them will be Tories. In the South, that fortress of Conservatism, that huge area all the way around and down, Surrey, Sussex, right the way along, only a 9% Conservative lead left there. Now let's just look at how this landscape has changed so dramatically for the Conservatives. Here are half all the seats in Britain were Conservative in 1992, represented here by their majorities, huge, great columns of blue, some of them very tall, some of them very small, like this one here, that represents a very tight seat in Brecon and Radnorshire, and that was one that was easy for the opposition to gain. But let's just shape these towers of blue regionally so that we can see them, where we've kept them at their proportions to show you what the majorities were. Here, for example, is Kensington and Chelsea, the safest seat of all in London. And now we'll have a look now at them region by region. We're going to go region by region now and just look at them. And we're going to start with Scotland over here. And here you see the effect of Labour's attack on Scotland. No MPs left for the Tories there at all. In the north, Nobody left in the marginal seats down the bottom, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats making a huge assault on the Highlands up there. Here we have the Midlands and Wales, and very few of the foothills left, one or two of them there, but the opposition attack reaching right up into the higher parts there, London, and the same thing in the south. David, back to you.
Peter, let's go down to Falmouth and Camborne. Sebastian Coe there, the Olympic middle distance gold medal winner, and a mass of candidates that he attracted to this seat where his majority was 3,200 or so. There's Peter de Savary, standing for the referendum party, the millionaire or maybe billionaire, I don't know which.
Glitter, Gary, official monster raving loony party, 161. Holmes, Paul Thomas, Liberal, 527. Jones, Terry Lynn, Liberal Democrat, 13,512. Luorn, Ruth, Mebian Kerno, 238.
It's the Cornish Independence
Smith,
Party.
Robert Lee, UK Independence Party, 355. And that Candice Kathleen Atherton has been duly elected to serve as member for the Falmouth and Camborne constituency.
So the former Mayor of Islington down there in Cornwall takes the seat, going from third place to top, and Sebastian Coe is defeated, his majority of 3,200 overturned by a majority of just under 3,000. Now let's go back to you, Peter, because we were stopped halfway through.
Yeah, well, we're just looking at these mountain tops of Conservative strength here. There's London with Kensington and Chelsea. I can't reach the top of Alan Clark's seat. He's just survived. As you can see, the opposition attack has gone right up here into the foothills, into the mountains, but not the very heights up there. There, by the way, I forgot to mention, we went past this Tatton, Martin Bell's success in the safest seat of all in the Tory North. And now we come finally across here to the south. This is the great stronghold of Toryism. Watts, Labour's and the Liberal Democrats attack down there. There's the onslaught going right up through the foothills into the much safer seats, even gaining some of these heights up here, but not, of course, seats like Beaconsfield right up at the top here. And let's just now look at the whole new landscape of Britain and see how the colour has dramatically changed. The swings have been getting greater and greater as you move towards the south. That's why here in London you have this devastation of Tory strength in London, only 11 seats left there for the Tories. Down here in the south, 90 seats left for the Tories, 53 down on where they were before. And so the new pattern of Britain, the new landscape of Britain, is very little blue left compared to what it was. And there you see the number of losses they've suffered right the way across all the regions. 178 losses probably altogether in this election, with one or two seats still to come. I'm not quite certain about that number. It looks like 178, the worst since 1900 or so. David.
Thanks, Peter. Jeremy Hanley, former chairman of the party, former Northern Ireland minister, defeated in Richmond Park by Jenny Tong, the Liberal Democrat, after many battles, the Liberal Democrats trying to take that seat. And this is how Jeremy Hanley responded to his defeat.
If more Conservatives were like John Major, if they'd fought as honourable a battle and put their country first, as John Major has done, in trying to recover this nation from the depths that it was in before, we would have done far better. If we had stuck together as a party far better and followed John Major's leadership, we would have done better.
Jeremy Hanley there. And now we go to Covent Garden early this morning, to the piazza, where Krishnan Gurumurthy has some people with him responding to this. No, the Covent Garden Market, it looks like, rather than the piazza.
That's
anyway,
right.
Krishnan.
Good morning, David. Well, they said New Labour, New Britain, so we came to New Covent Garden, where the people here were among the first to wake up to the end of Conservative rule. Morris, did you get what you wanted?
Yeah, I did actually, yes, I did.
And what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to an equal kind of attitude to the way the country is run. I believe the way the Tories have dominated over the last, 17 years, I think it's a good day for democracy. And me personally, on a personal issue, I've been to experience the national health system through illnesses and one thing and the other, and it's absolutely disgusting. On that issue alone, I've certainly gone towards Labour. I have voted Tory the election before last, but last one and this one's been Labour.
All right, well, David, do you share his view?
Not at all, no. Tory man through and through. Ted Heath's my local man. Thank goodness he got in. But Tony Blair says no income tax change, that's good. Don't change the VAT and look after the small businessman.
Well, Tim, what about you?
I go along with my brother there. I think that...
What do you think is really going to change? What's really going to be good about Britain under a Labour government?
Well, I think people going to be sort of better off with the education and with transport. I think they'll put a lot of money into transport, in the underground, British Rail. I think they should maybe nationalise that again.
Well, lots to look forward to, maybe. Yes. Gentlemen, thank you very much. David.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krishnan. Jeremy.
David, well, I'm joined now by Stephen Dorrell, the Health Secretary. Stephen Dorrell, I don't know whether you heard the Prime Minister's speech at Central Office. He didn't sound like a man who wanted to go on, did he?
He was a man, I think, who was setting out clearly the priority which the Conservative Party now faces. And that's a priority to ensure that whenever Prime Minister Blair looks into his mirror, he sees a credible, attractive, alternative government looking over his shoulder. It's the task of the opposition to call the government to account and to present an alternative way of dealing with the nation's problems. That's the challenge that the Conservative Party now faces.
Under a new leader, presumably?
Well, I think the leadership question is frankly a secondary question.
Okay.
What's a primary question is the importance of the Conservative Party re-establishing the coalition of interest on the centre-right of politics, where I believe the majority view in Britain still rests.
Do you share the view of the Tory Reform Group that you were scuppered by the activities of the right wing?
I don't believe that the language that the Tory Reform Group used is in any way helpful at this stage in the developments. What I think we need to do is to sit down in a quiet and calm way, to look at the lessons that are to be drawn from this general election campaign and ensure that we build a party that is true to its traditions as the longest established democratic political party anywhere in Europe.
But you're talking about sorting yourself out maybe late this year, early next, something like that?
I'm talking about starting on Monday morning, as John Major made clear in his speech in Central Office. This is a task the moment one election is over, whether you win it or lose it. A democratic political party ought to be then thinking about the way forward, its objectives, what it stands for, what it means to argue for, and how it means to deliver them.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you very much.
The time to start that is next week.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you.
Let's just catch up on what's been going on in Scotland and have a summary of the news from there with Jane Frankie. Jane.
Thanks, David. Well, in effect, as Sir David Steele said earlier, the Scottish Liberal Democrats are the opposition party in Scotland tonight. They have 9 seats. The Scottish National Party have 6. Labour have 56. The Tories have lost all theirs. Even the jubilant Shadow Scottish Secretary George Robertson acknowledged that they couldn't believe it when they saw all the Tory seats and their high-profile incumbents fall as they did like ninepins. It means, presumably, that English MPs will make up the front bench on the opposition benches during Scottish questions on the Scottish Grand Committee. An extraordinary situation. The Scottish nationalists, while doubling their seat total, really didn't make any breakthrough into the Labour stronghold that they were trying to do, although their big scalp of the night, of course, was Ian Lang, the President of the Board of Trade. But our new Labour MPs do include some pioneers. Mohammed Sarwar, who won Glasgow Govan, will be the first Muslim MP in Parliament, and Anne Begg, who won Aberdeen South, will be the first wheelchair-bound Member of Parliament. There's 1 seat left to declare up here tonight. It's almost certain to stay with the Liberal Democrats, but the main story north of the border is that for the first time since 1832, Scotland has no Tory MPs.
Thanks very much, Jane. Well, let's just have a final reminder this morning of how things stand. This is the state of the parties. We've still got 35 results to come in, but at the moment, with 624 declared, Labour is on 416, up 145, well over that 330 they needed to have a majority in the new House of Commons. The Conservatives way down on 157, minus 174. 174 net losses. The Liberal Democrats on 40, and the Nationalists on 3, others on 1. Based on those 624 results we've had in so far, a Labour majority of 179 is predicted, the biggest ever and the largest swing that Labour's had since 1945 in the tail end of the Second World War. The lowest Conservative number of seats now since 1906, and the party facing wipeout in Scotland and Wales. For the Liberal Democrats, they're heading for the highest number of seats for a third party since 1929. They've had a good night in terms of the seats they've had. And here are the highlights of the night and the declarations and the stories of success and defeat that we've heard. Well, the end of a most dramatic night in British politics, which has seen the virtual wipeout of the Tory party in Britain. Tony Blair going with a huge majority to the palace tomorrow to become Prime Minister. Join us at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and we'll have all the news then. From all of us here, good night.